Amita, please answer. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Hello. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Changemakers 6.0. Changemakers is a series where we bring people who have created change in business and in society. Past guests to this series at Jaipuria Institute of Management have included Indra Nui from Pepsi, Aditya Ghosh from Indigo Airlines, Radhika Gupta from Edelweiss, Shiv Kumar from Nokia, Pepsi, and Aditya Birla, Dr. A. Vellumani from Thyrocare, and Dr. Kiran Bedi. Today, we are extremely excited to have Ms. Vineeta Singh, co-founder and CEO of Sugar Cosmetics. So welcome, Vineeta. Thank you for agreeing to be a part of this series with us.
Thank you so much, Shiva.
I'll just do a quick introduction for you and then hand it over to you. Vineeta is the co-founder and CEO of Sugar Cosmetics, the cult favorite beauty brand amongst Gen Zers and millennials. I'm sure, Vineeta, there are a lot of millennials and Gen Zers on this call today as students. With an annualized sales run rate of 500 crores, the company has scaled faster than any other in this industry and is now amongst the top 3 cosmetic brands in terms of sales and contributions in the month in the country. It has a physical presence of 45,000 retail touchpoints across 550 plus cities and has a digital community of 5 million beauty enthusiasts across all platforms. Over a decade ago, Vineeta and IIM Ahmedabad and IIT Madras alumni had declined top dollar investment banking placement offers to start her own venture. Vineeta co-founded Sugar Cosmetics in 2015 with a single point agenda of creating a world-class makeup products and with high pigmentation that specifically catered to the Indian skin tone. Vineeta is also a fitness buff who, with numerous ultra marathons and triathlons to her credit, being an avid runner for the last decade, she has completed the Comrades Ultra Marathon, which is an 89-kilometer long, thrice from 2012 to 2014. Apart from that, Vineeta and her husband Kaushik are also the first Indian couple to finish the grueling long-distance Ironman triathlon in Austria, which is widely regarded as the toughest single-day sporting event in the world. So, Vineeta, we are very excited to hear about your journey. I'm sure it was not a straight line from being an ambitious MBA student to being a successful entrepreneur. So if you could tell us a bit about that journey. And while Vineeta is speaking, if you have questions, I would love if you could put it in the Q&A box. And once she's done, we're going to take some of those questions to her. So over to you, Vineeta.
Super. Thank you so much for the introduction, Shivats. And I'm pretty sure you and I are the only millennials out of this group of 492, and everybody else in the audience is Gen Z. And I think nothing gives me more happiness than speaking to Gen Z students, especially because more than what I get to teach them, I get to learn so much every day because I think this is one of the most sorted generation in terms of what they want out of life. And very happy to see that more than 500. I don't think this is like one of my B school classes where we had mandatory attendance and there were marks for class participation, but I'm seeing more than 500 students have joined in, and so many of them are already raising their hands. I mean, I remember myself again being a backbencher who would, like, if the teacher asked a question, I would start trying to hide under the desk so that I wouldn't be making eye contact with the teacher. Yes, I see Namita, Chandok, and a lot of others, 8 others raising their hands and very enthusiastic about this session. So very excited about this. I think very excited about the fact that I have such an engaged audience over here because while in Zoom you have this feeling of talking into blankness as opposed to in person, but just seeing this kind of interaction keeps me going. So yes, there are these reaction features and Q&A boxes. Please bring it all on. Keep sharing whatever reactions you have so that I just feel the pulse of these amazing 540 faces, which I unfortunately cannot see at the moment. And the number seems to be rising. Oh my God, this is probably the biggest webinar I've ever done. So excited about that. And I also feel that, when I was doing my B school education, if I had the opportunity to listen live to Indra Nui and Aditya Ghosh, I definitely think my journey, which I will talk about, which is so full of spectacular failures, would have probably, been not as painful as it turned out to be. But of course, talking about the journey, because you mentioned about becoming a CEO from an MBA student. I'm not sure how many are MBA students here. Would be happy to see them raise hands to understand the audience that I'm talking to. But I think like everybody else, I want to start with where I was in your shoes. Um, Many years, about 17 years ago, when at the age of 23, I graduated from IIM Ahmedabad and decided to start up. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen so that I can show a few slides that I've put together for this session, which are just visuals. Yeah, is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, cool. So just trying to blend into the topic, MBA to CEO journey of mine. It starts with this, the conversation that Shrivat had in my introduction, which is the part about me having this top dollar package at that time. This is 2007. The red bricks in the background is IIM Ahmedabad, my alma mater, where I was a fresher student. And it was, I was very lucky. I had nothing to do with the fact that I turned out to be the one of the 6 people for the first time ever in the history of IIMs to get that coveted 1 crore package. It wasn't in India. A lot of people ask me, dollar mein tha, rupees mein tha. It wasn't in India, but it was an international banking job offer. And I went from within like 10 days of becoming every mother's, look at this girl, you should be like her, to becoming, look at this girl, never, ever, ever be like her person, because I actually went ahead and declined this job offer because I wanted to start up. And the entire era of starting up, this back in 2007, before the entire startup ecosystem, and of course the wave that has been created by Shark Tank and all the news that we see about this term called unicorns. I mean, this is literally internet almost, because this is 2007, and while internet was around, but can you imagine, there was no Amazon or Flipkart yet in India. And but my journey had started before that, when I was on my way to the engineering college that I studied at, which was IIT Madras. So I grew up in Delhi, and both my parents come from services background. Both are non-medical doctors, so which is PhD. So in, I don't know if this generation what is friends, but what Ross Geller was. So the kind of doctor who has a doctor in the name but can't save a life if somebody's having a heart attack on the plane. And I grew up in the AIMS campus, and I was like on my flight from Delhi to Chennai. And the reason I picked Chennai, while having grown up in Delhi, was not because I liked idli dosa more than aloo ke parathe. I was a hardcore aloo ke parathe, on Sundays, and rajma and chole lover, and obsessed about home food. But it was the first time in my life that I was seeing that I was getting an opportunity to actually go live in a hostel, be by myself, and really, figure out life on my own terms. And I just grabbed it with both hands. So while I had like a rank which could get me Delhi, I convinced my parents that my passion and ambition and dream was to do electrical engineering, which I knew clearly I'm going to hate. But I convinced them that, let me go to Chennai and do this electrical engineering course, which was supposed to be very tough because of the fact that it had the departments that flunked a lot of people. And on my first flight from Delhi to Chennai, I was sitting on the plane, and I overheard somebody in the back seat behind me telling somebody else, I teach at IIT Madras. And I was, I didn't know anybody in Chennai, and I got very excited. I swapped places with 2, 3 people, went and sat next to the gentleman who claimed to be teaching at IIT Madras, introduced myself. Hi, I'm going to, study BTech, electrical engineering. What do you do? And he took out a card which says, Head of Department, Electrical Engineering, IIT Madras. And he was the person, the Professor Junjunwala, who had been hearing about for so many days that he's this professor who flunks everybody and he's really hardcore. And I froze. And I froze not just because I heard so many scary things about him, but also I realized that Delhi Chennai is a 2 hours and 45 minutes long flight. And I had already sought my seat and I was not going back. And I was just stuck sitting next to him. And you know how professors are. I don't know if you teach Shivats, but professors at that time were very, every opportunity that they got, they reminded you about how you still know nothing. And he started asking me, okay, you're going to electrical engineering. So tell me, how does the tube light circuit work? And what's the difference between analog and digital? And so on and so forth. And I had the answers to none of the questions. And then he's like, TK, you don't know all of this. Fine. I mean, you should be knowing, but let's excuse that for a minute. But at least tell me, what do you want to do? What do you want to become? And I was like, the standard, I'm sure you must be sitting through some of these mock interviews. And, when candidates are asked in these interviews by companies that are coming in for placements, that what do you want to do? What's your aspiration? They say, I really want to contribute to an organization. I want to, contribute to the nation and I want to change the world and all of that. So I went into my same student spiel that I want to contribute to any organization that I work and I want to make a dent in the universe and I want to, change things in India and all of that. And he could really see through some of the fluff because I was 17 and I didn't know what really meant by changing the world. And, so he said, no, but, what do you want like out of a career? What do you realistically want? And I said, finally, I just, he gave, when you have this concept of 5 whys, right? Somebody keeps asking 5 whys. Similarly, like, somebody will, why do you want to, change the world? What do you get out of it? And then he started pushing. And then it boiled down to a very, very shallow statement that literally came out of my mouth. I said, I want to become rich. And of course, like any professor who's really passionate about what he does, he gave me this like that look that how predictable. And of course I had grown up in Delhi and I think he also had this my god, this is so predictably shallow. And then he said that okay, fine, you want to become rich, let's just take that for now, but what do you think you can do to really become rich? And then we started talking about like career options, and one of the things he mentioned is that if you want to really have become rich but have fun doing that, then one of the things that you should consider is becoming an entrepreneur, because anyways I think he figured कि electrical engineering में तो इसका कुछ होने वाला नहीं है, so something tangential only she needs to do. And since she has this clarity which she's trying to hide under layers of changing the world, etc., let me just propose this to her. And when he told me that, it just stuck in my head, entrepreneurship. And I went back to campus and I was, I used those 4 years to really devour every single book that existed in the library on campus about entrepreneurship. So I read the autobiographies of all Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison, and at that time Howard Schultz, who was the founder of Starbucks, and there were many books that I went through. And I got really excited about the idea, where I was like, okay, entrepreneurship is something where you do leave a legacy behind and you can actually make money in the process, because that's what it looked like for most of those books. And so I went to B school at Ahmedabad with this mission that I'm going to study business for 2 years and then figure out how to become an entrepreneur. So by the time this day happened, which is in 2007, I was 23 years old. I had like a great campus job offer, but I had the complete clarity that I'm going to, like become an entrepreneur. So, yeah, so this is the story. And when you look at the story of my journey, you think about it saying that, okay, she was in 2007 on the cover of a magazine. She decided to start up. And, in like we discussing into 2024, she's the founder of a company called Sugar, which wasn't mentioned in my introduction, but is the third largest color cosmetics brand in India. And it is a pretty crowded market with with the biggest brands in the world and the largest corporate FMCG ecosystem. And in that, to create something which is now the third largest in market share, it's not a small feat. So it sounds like, one of those stories that you really think about. But, the what I want to share with you from my journey is that there is a catch. And the catch is that, I don't know if you can see this, but entrepreneurship on social media is now being spoken about so much. It is like the most glorified career aspiration. And like I said, everything's gone from, in my time, 2007, when I decided I'm going to not take up the job, and my entire extended family going like, hi rabba, matlab puri education waste ho gayi, seat waste ho gayi, sara effort waste ho gaya, becoming an entrepreneur. And everybody in my extended circle saying that whatever you do, don't be like her because you're being stupid deciding to become an entrepreneur. And to now, my friend who's Anupam tells me that on shadi.com, entrepreneur is the most sought after match. And it has become so aspirational that when I now meet 8-year-old girls at airports, they tell me that, hey, I want to become an entrepreneur when I grow up too. And the part that they are saying that is not surprising because they watch television. But the part that's surprising is that their moms are like really nodding in agreement, and they're actually willing to, have their little princess go down that road of entrepreneurship, which, as you will hear from my story, is quite a treacherous path. But we will come to that. So yes, entrepreneurship all glorified on social media, but actually it is literally like, I think in the first 4-5 years especially, I was doing everything from कोई आया नहीं क्लीन करने, झाड़ू पोछा, कॉफी गिर गई तो क्लीन इट अप योरसेल्फ, टू सेल्स कॉल, सुबह बैठ के non-stop cold calling to get clients into the business, to packing boxes, to shipping out orders, to responding to customer ki queries, or landing up at an influencer's place dressed as Santa to say, hey, surprise from Sugar, and then slamming the door on my face. It was all like this chaotic mess. And the reality of my journey is that while it looks on paper like the story of an MBA becoming a CEO, and that coming out of my capabilities, or something that I inherently had as a skill, it actually is the story of someone who became an entrepreneur, not realizing what exactly it involves, and getting really lost on the way and having extreme self-doubt, and wondering if I'm somebody who's even built to be an entrepreneur, because I realized that looking back, all the books that I had read were all these amazing visionary genius men who created these world-changing products, and that gave them the legitimacy to become an entrepreneur. And I was relatively an ordinary person who who was not a man. And I did not have the kind of genius that some of them had of creating like a one of a lifetime kind of product for the universe. And I had, my leadership style was also not like alpha like theirs, where I could speak to like thousands of people and sway them. I considered myself like a humble person who, really came and spoke with a lot of authenticity, but was not very grandiose. Maybe I was not meant to be an entrepreneur. And through all of those self-doubts, the only thing that I had was that I did not quit. And so when you look at my journey and you think about the fact that in 2007, I decided to give up my job. And 10 years later, into my journey of being an entrepreneur, after having given up a pretty comfortable salary package at that time, I was quite broke, right? And in those years of 2014, 15, 16, 17, when I was seeing that I had used up the extension that I asked my parents for, saying that I told them that mujhe 2 saal do. If I don't take, my company doesn't grow, then I'm gonna really take up a job. Then 2 saal ho gaye, kuch nahi hua. And then it was the 5-year time frame ke paas, and I was like, 5 years, I'll take my company public. And if it doesn't happen, I'll take up a job. And then 7 years, 8 years, because building a business was hard. I started with a business which was about creating lingerie for women in India, which got no funding. So, pivoted to a services company doing background verification for clients and trying to use tech there. But sales was very hard. And then pivoted that to an e-commerce company from which later Sugar came up. And in this whole journey, I found myself 10 years into starting up, having failed at three businesses quite spectacularly, with really nothing to show, nothing in my bank account, very broke, and having a lot of self doubt about whether I was built to be an entrepreneur or not. And in that process, I mean, in that journey, I think the only thing to my credit was not, any visionary capabilities that I had or an ability to do sales better than anybody in class. I wasn't the smartest person in the room. I think the power I had was that I did not quit. And there were many moments where I could have just said that, mere bas ka nahi hai, let me go take up a job. But there is a power in being broke, because you have nothing to lose, right? When I was in 2015, 16, 17, like I had nothing in my bank balance, but I had never seen a better life. I hadn't seen what it's like to, fly to different destinations and buy good stuff and have multiple houses and a fancy car. So I really was broke and had nothing to lose. And that really was my superpower, because I did not choose a career which rewarded me very early on, but I chose a career which rewarded me in terms of a lot of failures, but that came with a lot of learning. And that the fact that I had no money, which would seem like the biggest weakness to anybody. And the situation was so dire that, I remember my mom used to come visit me in Mumbai, and even like basic things like Aquaguard, I was literally boiling water every day and drinking because I was like, Aquaguard ke paise nahi hai. And my mom would come and like sponsor an Aquaguard. She bought the TV in my house. She was, from a comfortable middle class family, and she wanted to do all that for her daughter. But for me, having my parents invest so much of their effort, I was their only child, into me going to an IIT and, an IIM, and then not still have that comfort that my daughter's got it, she's going to be self-sufficient. That was a very stressful feeling. And even if I did not have, I had the power of being broke and I had nothing to lose, and which is why I didn't want to quit. I did have that pressure of letting my parents down. And I think there is so much power in, just getting fueled by making sure that we don't want to let our parents down, which is why, even though I had seen 10 years of failure, I continued working hard and I did not give up. And in 2015, something magical happened. I would want to say that the magic was sugar, which it was. But, there was also this series of lucky things, like the whole internet boom in India. Basically, 2015-16 onwards, Geo took off in India. That meant that as of today, as on 2024, there are 800 million people who have access to internet in the smallest towns in the country. When 2014-15, when I was still the struggling entrepreneur pre-sugar, this number was about 140 million. So we're talking about like a 5 to 6 times growth in the number of people who had access to internet. This meant that, the way they were going to shop brands and products was going to change dramatically. The fact that suddenly this category, which was 2% e-commerce back in 2014-15, is today 20 to 25% e-commerce, because sitting in any of the 19,000 pin codes in India, you can shop a sugar product online on sugarcosmetics.com or on Amazon. And even with one warehouse in Bhiwandi, near Mumbai, I can actually service these 19,000 pin codes. And there are more than 300 million people on Instagram, and on YouTube, more than 400 million. These are all people who you can really build like, fantastic visual storytelling about a brand for. Now, all of this was possible because somehow in 2015, 16, after 10 years of failure, I had the courage to not quit. And I turned out to be at the right place at the right time, just right before that revolution of made in India brands taking off. And I was, Sugar was a beneficiary from that wave. And we started as like the 20th, 30th ranking brand. And then we went omni-channel. We were available in stores, and now we're the third largest. All of that happened. And a lot of people can say that, hey, you were at the right place at the right time. That's really lucky of you. And to that, I respond that yes, I'm at the right place at the right time, finally, because I went through the other three quadrants, the wrong place, wrong time quadrant, and the wrong place, right time quadrant, and the wrong time, right place quadrant. And then जब आपके पास एक ही बचा होता है and you're, still there, then sometimes the tailwinds of both luck and the market dynamics come in and pick you up. And that's what happened with Sugar. So yes, talking about the journey, this is actually a real picture from 2014, which my husband, blackmailed me with for a long time. This is one of the 100 venture capital rejection calls. And, the whole experience around fundraising in India is still hard because there is just like, few funds for all the startups that exist. And especially if you look at funding goes to women-led companies, it's minuscule. It's less than 2%. I mean, it's in the world, as per a Harvard study, 2.6%. But in India, it's even less than 2% of the capital that goes to women-led companies. And for a venture capitalist in 2014 to understand that young women want long-lasting lipsticks because in their confidence level, there's a difference between a lipstick that comes off in 2 hours versus 10 hours was very hard, because all of them were men. And this was like a real problem which women were dealing with because they were finally getting out to work and they were, going to college like many of you. But venture capitalists couldn't relate to that because, they would look at what their wives were using and it wasn't relevant for them. And I think, we had more than 100 venture capitalists who said no to sugar and then saying that, market is not big enough, category is cluttered, da, da, da. And this is after one more of those calls, one of those where till the last minute we were very hopeful because the confidence that we got was that we we're going to get the funding. And finally, when you get that call and that feeling, and I was, probably, like this failure for me was very hard hitting because I remember 2 hours I had this pillow on my face and I was crying. But the next morning, I told myself that that venture capitalist doesn't get it, but there are so many of these women who are there who, love us. Next morning, I did show up for them. I was there at office at 9 o'clock, showing up for my consumers. And that's what entrepreneurship is about. It's like 10 saal tak if you keep showing up 9 baje and you're putting in the hours, nothing can stop you because you get bad timings, COVID happens, and all kinds of crazy stuff happens, but you just don't quit. And then what can stop you? So this is, of course, every entrepreneur ka journey. And I feel that it's not just an entrepreneur. Every career goes through this journey. You go into a career with this excitement that, this is my passion. And suddenly reality sets in. Oh my God, there is something called office politics, for instance. Oh my God, it's not enough that my content is good. I need to be able to present well at meetings to get buy-in of senior management. All of that starts setting in. And then there is that phase where you're just like, figuring out what to do, but not knowing. And the key really is in those moments, if you believe in something, to just hang in there because eventually that product market fit happens. So I, love the story of this butterfly. Okay, so there is a like a story about a man who was once walking, and then he saw this cocoon lying by the side of the road, and there was a butterfly that was really struggling to come out of that cocoon. That the process of a larva becoming a butterfly, and he felt really bad because she was struggling, right? So he took up the cocoon and like made a little opening in it with a scissors so that the butterfly could easily come out. And it was, that process which was like earlier taking 45 minutes, and he was watching that butterfly struggle. while with just one snip, he managed to get it out. And, it happened in 2 minutes that the butterfly managed to come out. And then what happened was that the butterfly could never fly, because the process of getting out of that cocoon over hours and hours and days gets the wings to lose all the moisture and become lighter and gain strength, which is all part of the process of flying, which the man, with all his good intentions, deprived the butterfly of, because he just managed to make that snake. And I think one of the biggest learning that I had in my journey is that the struggle is part of the process. And there is no, and as when we are 23, the only thing we want in life is a shortcut. Like, can we get to, I had the ambition of having a fancy car by 30, IPO in 5 years, profitable company in 2 years. It's, we just want things, because when you're in your 20s, there are two things that happen. One is, like, time looks like 2 years look like a long time, because आपका पूरा college 2 साल या 4 साल में खत्म हो जाता है. So when you look at 2 years, it looks like a an era, right? But actually, it's nothing when you look at the long scale of your career. And the other thing that happens is FOMO, right? Everybody else is like, for those first 5 years, you think the universe is your batchmates. So every day you're comparing. I mean, for me, the hardest part of sticking to this journey was the weekends, because I would meet my batchmates who, had already bought a house for their parents, or, who had like a fancy car, and, they would want to meet at like a Hard Rock Cafe where a drink would be like 600 rupees for me, which would be like my entire month saving. And for them, it was nothing to, blow a few thousands over a night out, because they were earning like in lakhs. And, for me, I think the hardest part was to just not feel that pressure of comparison, that pressure of not being good enough compared to my batchmates. And I think that part, the recognizing that this struggle is for me to become a butterfly. And if I take a shortcut, and if I gives me an opportunity and says, ye lo 10 crore, kar lo jo karna hai, that will prevent me from becoming a butterfly, because every shortcut takes away the learning that comes from the struggles. And, one of the stories that I really talk a lot about. So this is my father. He was a scientist at AIMS, and just like my professor at IIT Madras, he was one of my biggest motivation becoming an entrepreneur, because growing up, my only ambition was, I don't want to be my dad. Because my dad was this really hardworking scientist who used to work like 15-hour days in his lab working on protein structures, but at the AIMS campus, but it was not a job that paid very well. And there was no recognition for all the work that he put in. And he would tell me every now and then that, I want to create the world record from India for the highest number of protein structures that are used to cure cancer. And I would look at that list that he had, and he was like, with some 200 odd, and there was like a Nobel laureate who was at 620 protein structures. And every day, a month, every year, he was creating like 15. So there was no way he could get up there. I mean, it was like one of those goals that just seemed like impossible. And I would always tell him that, whatever I do, I don't want to be a doctor when I grow up. I don't want to be a scientist when I grow up, because this is like the most weird form of delayed gratification, where you're passionately working so hard for a goal which you have no visibility on accomplishing. It's like, decades mein nahi hoga, right? And when my dad turned 70, 3 years back, I told him, let's do a party for your birthday. And he still goes to his lab every single day. And he told me that, ऐसा करते हैं, party 4 महीने के बाद करते हैं, because that's when I'm going to hit that number of 624 protein structures, which brings me the biggest in the world. And it was just for me that idea of him working over a 50-year period on a dream that like just seemed so irrational. And, everything I've realized that an entrepreneur does is exactly the same. You work on something which is such a large and unattainable dream, but sometimes the joy that comes from working on something like this is the reward, which you don't realize when you look at somebody from outside and think, ye to pagal hai. But, when you feel that, when you're in the moment, and this is what, so there is, a very an author I really admire called Jim Collins. He has a famous book called Good to Great, which you should definitely read, definitely, because it talks a lot about leadership. But one of his concepts outside of that book is this hedgehog concept, like, and it starts with what a company should be in which kind of area, but it applies to us as people. And of course, it is slightly similar to the whole Japanese ikigai concept. But really, I mean, the only thing you should be thinking about in your 20s is not getting the best job on campus, not what's going to get you like a good designation or salary or a cool career. It should really be about very quickly finding a career that somebody is going to pay you for, but you're genuinely excited about, and there's some natural instinct in you that gets you to that, right? And for me, I feel that I tried all kinds of businesses which did not work for me, but only when I worked in, and I feel always built to create a consumer business, because my biggest strength is observing and like using insights to create products, and I love doing that. So it's something that I get rewarded about because I have a unique insight that I'm able to bring to the table. It's something that I can be really good at because I realize that other people can have the same conversation and not derive that insight, which I can. And it's something that just brings me so much joy. And I think for each of you, the only aspiration I would have is find that thing, and no matter how long it takes, keep searching till you get there. But be honest about what you're good at, and not like surface level saying that I'm a good communicator. There will be go one step more, try lots of things till you find that overlap between what you are passionate about, what you feel could be your life purpose, and what you're good at, and can be a potential career. Very quickly, yes, so good things take time, patience, and a lot of love, which is what we call passion in some language, but I always call it love. And I think I will go faster, but my learning has been that ambition and gratitude can coexist. And I really felt in my journey that you can have like a large enough dream and be unsettled about it, but be grateful for where you are. And I feel that when I meet kids in their 20s, the one thing that they're not as grateful for where they are and what they have, because I think in terms of resources, this generation has a lot of resources and a lot of access and a lot of smartness. With just a little bit of gratitude, there's a lot that we can do. So this has been the journey. And I think, again, coming back to gratitude, if you're grateful for the career paths that you have, then you can let the power of compounding happen. And I think there's a big difference between compounding, which is the first image, versus what most of us do. And I also did in my 20s, which is next shiny object, next, where you're not really having the patience to build excellence in something. I mean, there is a book called about 10,000 hours. Even if you don't agree with 10,000 hours, just the fact that compounding works where for many years there's no progress and then suddenly it explodes. And every successful person or successful business that you've seen, or even a Ronaldo or a Messi, you'll see that same journey that they've gone through. And finally, I think I wish you all have a CEO mindset on day one, because you can't acquire it at the age of 40 if you don't have it at the age of 22. And I think there's, just 2-3 things I will remind you of that. One is sweat the small stuff. And this is my last section, but this is a Q&A I want you to answer, because I feel that, the small things, like the language that you use, the way you dress up, the way you carry yourself, how fit you are, how you show up, no matter how cool like the lazy girl vibe or the whole athlete generation is, these small things always have an unreal ROI in terms of rewarding your career. And we should care about that, right? So I'll give you an example, right? Now, I need you to, in your chat boxes, answer this question, okay? So this is just about grammar, okay? So look at my phone. Dash screen is cracked. Is it A or B? Can you answer in your text boxes, please? A या B answer करो. B, A, A, B, B, A, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B. Okay. Yes, so the confusion is real. I thought only people in my office had a confusion, right? So I don't want to take a grammar class here. You can find it out. It is actually the answer is B, because its screen, it belongs to the screen, belongs to the phone. But the point I'm trying to make is it's not a small difference, and it's not about grammar Nazi or communication. It's just everything. When you make a deck, make a good one. When you make a presentation, do it with authenticity. When you write a mail, write a message. I'm working hard, dash my communication. Is it A or B? Answer. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, answer. Somebody had messaged sound not audible carefully. I hope that's not applicable now.
Lot of A's, so I think.
Okay.
I hope you're right.
Okay. Yes. Improve. Yes, everybody's getting this right. But a lot of people get confused between improvise and improve. Improvise means try something differently, but improve is do something better. Okay. I really want Dash to participate in this quiz. A or B? Answer. A. Okay. Then I think this is a Bombay thing, because everybody in Bombay thinks that YOU''LL is you all, but it is not. You all is, it's a very bad usage. Y'ALL, but that's what it is, right? Dash the smartest students I've ever spoken to, and I mean it, I'm sure, looking at the answers. But is it A or B? Okay, A. Everybody's got it right. Okay, I'm not going to go into it, but you get the point, right? It is, think about these things because they matter. If you want to be a CEO, agar chill marne ka hai, to no problem. But if you really want to see, be a CEO, this stands out. The second part is about ownership, and this is of course a very mere zamane ka very, very bad meme about how in in a ham and egg sandwich the chicken is involved and the pig is committed. You don't need to do that, but I can tell you at least 5 people in this organization who now are at a CXO level who have no degree in either product or marketing or retail. And the only reason that they are where they are is that from day one, they thought of this organization whenever they were assigned a task. They didn't think mera job kya hai, mera KRA kya hai, kitne ghante kaam karna hai kya. They always thought of it as their own, which meant that they were willing to solve problems outside the box. And I think that is something that you develop on day one. Whatever organization you join, do you treat it as your own or not? And the last and final slide for today, for me, is, our careers are going to look like the one on the right. There is no shortcut to becoming a CEO. There is no shortcut to building a great business. There is no shortcut to even becoming like an aspirational influencer or an actor or some of the other glamorous careers. All the careers go through this, crazy journey of ups and downs. And it's just about having the patience and clarity to stay the course and not quit too early. And B, of course, bouncing back from our failures and making the best of it. So with this, I think I'm going to hand it over to Shrivat sir in terms of, I know I've taken more time, like I always do, but I will let him figure out whether we want to do first the Q&A from the students or his questions or whatever. But
yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vineeta. It was an amazing presentation. I think such a great journey of just resilience. And the other thing that I feel great about is that I'm not the only grammar Nazi. My HR department hates me because I often reject resumes that have even 1 or 2 punctuation mistakes. So so I'm very happy to see that you think similarly. You spoke a lot about resilience, about just doing the same thing for 10 years in spite of failure. Can you talk a little bit more about the mindset? Because, especially now in an age where we are exposed to so much social media, everyone on holiday, everyone richer than us, everyone having a good time. But we don't often see failure like in our lives. We don't talk about failure to our friends. So how did you prepare yourself for failing or at least not succeeding and keeping going for 10 years?
Yeah. So I think, I will tell you what I did at B school. And at that time, I didn't know it had such a big role to play. So when I came into B school, I got to know that in the batch that I was joining, there was going to be like the elections of the batch representative, and I just felt that somebody told me that in like all these years at IIM, they've never had a batch rep who's a woman, because the batch had like about 200 students, out of which only 25 were women, and I thought that I am going to change. Right. So I decided to stand for the position of the batch representative, which meant that I actually, for 4 or 5 days, and I am had like a very, very tight curriculum, lots of case studies till midnight. But in spite of all of that, I was doing this mega campaigning where I would start in the morning and, meet like, after every class, a lot of classmates, pitch my manifesto and try to get them to believe that I could represent them. And it was one of those things that I really worked hard for, and I really wanted it because I just felt that I was the right person, and I just felt that it's unfortunate that itne saalon mein koi ladki, and if there's some girl who's going to change it, it's going to be me. And then finally they basically had declared the results, and it was out of a batch of 200 odd students. I actually had a total of 7 votes. Okay. And which includes my own, by the way. So 6 plus me. And I was like, yeah, isse zyada to mere friends hai. Nobody voted for me. And I, really at that point of time, I wanted to like just hide in a shell and not face anybody. And it was just my first public embarrassment of that scale, because, when you're a student, you don't do such embarrassing things. And for me, it actually, I took a while to get over it. And then I realized like few months later that nobody remembers I got 7 votes. I had to they didn't even return my security deposit, because they're like, the 10 se kam vote pe hum wo bhi nahi dete. But nobody cared about that, just the fact that I tried and I failed. People thought that I was like, it was quite cool. And the thing about failures and rejections is that the more you go through them, the more resilience you get. And there is no other way around it. I mean, the only way for anybody to figure out a way to like, know how to deal with failures is just put themselves in these situations. Nobody needs to stand for an election. Nobody needs to like go say that I'm going to learn new hobby, which is I'm going to learn calisthenics or, some weird thing like that, which is physically very hard. But the reason we do all of that is that all of this is the only way that we learn how we can deal with failures. And the thing that happened to me in that election is that while I thought that it was like the most embarrassing moment of my life, it led to my comfort zone thoda sa expanding by like 1 millimeter. And comfort zone is something it like quickly shrinks but takes a lot of effort to expand. So I managed to do that. And I would just say to everybody, like, put yourselves like show up for random things, sign up for random things. I signed up for a marathon when I had not even done a 100-meter race in my life before. And it was, all of these things have, what do I do? I am like just dead. How am I going to do it? And all of that. And everybody's like, are you mad? What are you doing? Every now and then I have these people telling me, are you mad? What are you doing? And most of them turn out to be these disasters. But what happens is that dheere karke, that comfort zone, like the only way to get over the stage fright of speaking to people, which by the way is like people fears public speaking more than they fear death, is by having those embarrassing moments where you crack this joke in front of so many people and nobody laughs, which has happened to me all the time. But every time I try jokes, because I'm like, the day jokes land, it's gonna be for me a big unlock, and I want to be like somebody who's not boring when I speak. But so many times they bomb, right? So it's just about the fact that can you keep expanding your comfort zone. And one more thing I'll just say, that like a lot of times the journey, like if I tell anybody, if you're a student saying that tum CEO banoge Tata Group ke, right? It sounds like such an overwhelming thing, right? Like, how am I going to do that? I'm just like a normal person. What I learned from my marathon journey and in my, when I used to do these 89 kilometers runs, it was like, when you think about the fact that, my God, abhi I'm still at mile 21, kilometer 21, and mujhe abhi 89 kilometers pahunchna hai, it is like very discouraging. So what I would do is I would not think about 89 kilometers. I would just say, can you get to the next light pole? And then all you need is the courage to show up and get to the next light pole. And next light pole pe sochenge na next light pole ka. So there is, you have to mix, you have to have your eyes set on like a big ambition, like 1,000 crore ki company banani hai. But think about next customer, next product every single day. Because a lot of times when it's overwhelming and you think you can't do it, it is the motivation to get to the next point and stay the course that keeps you going, rather than the, the scary, big, audacious, hairy
Focus
goal.
on the next. So I think I want to actually pivot to something that was in your introduction about you being a marathon runner. One of the struggles that many young people have wanting to succeed in their career is that they often overlook their health, fitness, and we know that this is becoming a sort of a pandemic, especially in India but across the world. So how do you balance being a successful entrepreneur, going all out, but giving yourself time for your own health, body, fitness?
Yeah, I think all of this boils down to long-term thinking. I think it is really, if you look at your career as मेरे पास ये 3 साल है and 3 साल में मुझे GM बनना है and उसके लिए I'm gonna put everything. That is short-term thinking, and most of us do that. We're constantly like, बस मुझे 3 साल में GM बनना है, मैं जान निकाल दूंगा, मैं सब कुछ अपना life hold पे डाल दूंगा. I will not have a family till then. I will not, I will go to the gym after that and next year and so on and so forth, right? The moment you realize that none of our careers are actually, like, we really underestimate what we can accomplish over a 10 decade or 5 decades, 10 decades, sorry, 5 decade long career, like my dad, had this 52-year-old science journey. We always underestimate what we can accomplish. I am telling each one of your students today that they can all become a Tata Group CEO if they are for 30 years able to show up with that ownership, long-term thinking, and attention to detail. But they have to do it over 30 years. Now, the thing that you need to do something for 30 years is you can't put your life on hold. You have to prioritize health. You have to prioritize well-being, because the difference between a sprint, which is a 100-meter race, and a marathon, which is a 42-kilometer race, is pacing yourself and fueling yourself. And this staying fit is not optional anymore. It is the fuel that we need to show up 100% every single day and have the energy, not have sick days and many days, precious days of our leaves going into just a sick leave. All of that can come from being fitter. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that careers are built over. And I would, like an example of long-term thinking is, Shrivatsa, no matter how crazy it sounds, if I was 23 today and I had the option that you can work in a startup building AI for like $25,000 a year, which is much below sustenance level in the US, versus having a 2 crore ka banking job in India today, I would pick that AI role. And it sounds like illogical, because how do you compare $25,000 in the US versus 2 crore in India? But the point is long-term thinking. If I think that the world is going to change in 30 years, 40 years because of AI, I need to, and it needs to be one of the things that I feel that, like, if it aligns with my passion, that I'm going to really go after. And so don't optimize short term. I think when we say, आज मैं 16 घंटे काम करूंगा, आज मैं Netflix देख लूंगा, and I think the answer to all the fitness woes, go back and check screen time. There is an app called Screen Time on most of our phones, which shows time spent on YouTube, time spent on Instagram. No matter how much we tell ourselves this is learning, and something like this could be, but most people are watching very short format. When you watch a 20-second, 60-second read, you're not registering anything, because that's how learning is designed. It's not like reading a book, no matter how.
It's like a dopamine hit.
It's a dopamine hit. So you add up all those hours you spent on Netflix, all the other OTTs, Instagram, YouTube, it adds up to 2 hours a day. Suddenly you put that into fitness or into learning something new. It can change your trajectory, not in 3 years, but in 30 years for sure. But you have to have that belief and keep going.
Absolutely. So I want you to talk a little bit about your leadership style because we talked about the failures before, but what made Sugar successful? What made Vineeta a successful entrepreneur? I know you've spoken in the past about servant leadership. Like on TV, leadership seems like command and control, right? Like the boss knows everything, but I'm sure the reality is very different. So can you touch upon your leadership style and what
Yeah.
makes it successful?
Yeah. I think, these are two things which probably I doubted but learned from experience work. One is, of course, like you said, servant leadership, which is a lot of us think that the most effective leaders are those who are alpha. And generally, I think women, and I'm generalizing here, but at least in my case, I experienced that did not give me joy. Being an alpha dictator, command, kind of a commander, kind of a leader, did not give me joy because at the end of the day, like I said, like 10-15 saal tak to reward nahi aata hai. So only reward you have is the faces of the people you work with. And I wanted to see inspiration there rather than fear. And so for my style is, and we have a culture where we have these 4H as values. The values are actually hunger, hustle, humility, and humor, because that's, I think, very critical in an organization. If people have to work as a team, that you have the humility to accept that you don't have all the answers, and like let get people excited about the mission as much as you are, and humility to learn from failures. And I feel that humility and the humor to not take yourself too seriously and think that I know everything is super critical. And we've also added that as a part of our values. And that's one. And second, I think, is which we're now all of us are realizing, is authenticity. I think one large part of leadership is being able to effectively communicate the why. Why did we start Sugar? Why are we building this organization? Why do we care so much about, say, participation of women in workforce? I think those people are a lot more motivated to find creative answers to problems when they understand the purpose. You can like tell somebody to, like they say, build a very, very fancy boat, but if you give, teach them to long for the seas and have desire to travel, the kind of boat that they will come up with will be much better. And I've seen that play out. And especially I thought that, leaders to bus the books mein jo padha tha वैसे होते हैं. But luckily, I again, the book that I recommend, which is Good to Great, talks about this servant leadership, and they've studied companies over decades to see that the best performing companies actually don't have those leaders. They have leaders who lead with humility.
Absolutely. So it's about showing and believing that the boss doesn't know anything and being vulnerable as a leader, right? So I'm going to take a couple of audience questions and then finish off with a quick, fire side Q&A at either or one. So Kunal is asking that he wants to become an entrepreneur, but is it a good idea to do a couple of years of experience, do a job for a couple of years on way to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So the right answer is that the more you get to work, you obviously learn something which you can apply, because when you're 23, you have no experience, you make very stupid mistakes like I did in my career. But the challenge is the part where I said that, our understanding of risk is related to what we already have. If today, Kunal, you have probably nothing to lose, right? Because you've never seen the life of somebody who earns X lakhs per annum and has a lifestyle. The day within 2 years, you will have all of that lifestyle to lose. So I think, I feel that the greatest risk in life is to not go after our dreams and to have regrets that we didn't try something. And if that, and most of us end up not having the courage to take those risks once we're used to a certain lifestyle and we have a lot more at stake. So if you think, and I know a lot of people who have that clarity, saying that, 3 years, definitely I'm going to quit and I'm going to start up, then yes, for 3 years, try to get a job in an area which fits in your passion where you think you'll start up. Like if I want to build a business which is around food, then can I work in a startup which is in the food space, for instance, or in an organization? Try to make sure that everything starts aligning so that you have that inspiration in 3 years to start up. So I think getting experience is great for an entrepreneur because you make fewer mistakes and you have a network you can raise money from. But it is also the hardest because you have a lot more at stake than right now when you're probably broke except for whatever your parents have.
Sure. You have a couple of more minutes, right? We just want to take one or two questions. We'll end at 6:05. So Gunjan, you talked about network. Gunjan is asking, how do you build a network coming out of the school?
Yeah. So see, one is that like to build a network, you can today write to anybody, right? And, reach out to people. There are so many people who are alumni from your institute. There are people who are probably from your city who went to, have some connection with you. Feel free to just go out there and write to them, because a lot of times just asking for mentorship gets you the right mentors. And I have seen that in my own journey, that, all that you need to do many times is ask. What will happen? 9 out of 10 people will not respond to you, right? But that one meeting that you get can change your life. So firstly, go ask. Second, I would say that there is even more powerful than networks today is what you can get from all the amazing, books and podcasts. And I focus on podcasts, which is not the same as YouTube shorts, because just being submerged in something for 1 hour ensures you have retention. So read more books. So if you look up to anybody, they don't respond to your email, fine, go figure out. I'm sure they'd have done a podcast if they're somebody who's, in the ecosystem. Listen to that podcast. You'll start getting a lot of learning from those than as much as you can get from having a personal conversation. And the third thing I think about network, what I have experienced is, if you go a networking event, it never works. But if you just go out there, get to know people in the real world and not, on social media. Also, you go and speak to people, try to understand what's going on in a flight when you're sitting next to somebody, have a conversation, be interested in people. 5 years later, you start connecting the dots, saying, oh my God, I met that person. Maybe that person can help me figure out this opportunity. And those dots start connecting. But you can't go out there and say, abhi main network banane ki zone mein hu, abhi main, chill maar raha hu. You have to be all the time curious to wanting to learn from people. And later the same people can become part of your network, where you end up helping them with something or taking help from them on something.
Sure. The last question I'll take from the student round is around funding, right? Because this is a big enigma. So what clicked for you when you finally got your funding? Now you're an investor on Shark Tank. What are the 1 or 2 things you look for when you are now on the opposite side of the table? So what clicks in funding?
Yeah. So I think firstly, if you want to raise capital, there are certain kind of businesses where it's relevant. And those are businesses which have the potential to become large. But that's not the only. I mean, 8 out of 10 businesses in India that are super successful never went the funding route. So it is not the only way to build a business. But yes, if you want to build a business which is going to be 500 crore, 1,000 crore, which is not necessarily your ambition, because you can build a super profitable 20 crore business and have a great lifestyle and a lot that, you can do in terms of freedom and not having an investor behind your back. But if you want funding, I think the most important thing, first thing that investors look for is how big is the market. It's called the target addressable market, TAM. And that was my biggest problem. Every time I started a business, it was a small market. And explaining to investors that this is a large enough market, women in India are going to buy more lipsticks in 5 years, it was very hard, right? So I think if you are trying to raise money, you will be faster if you are building a business in a market which is large and people believe that it's going to be large. And I think that is one of the biggest roadblocks that a lot of people have, because they start a business with a problem that they can relate to. But that does not what Bharat's problem is, which is why this business may not become as large as you think it will. So I think through market size if you want to raise money. And if your market size is not going to be and remember the fact that India may average per capita income is $2,000. So think about every business from that perspective. Kitna bada hoga when average income is $2,000 an annum, which is very low, right? So very few businesses can become very, very large. Do you want to build that? If yes, you should raise capital. And then what I look for as an investor is somebody who has the humility to learn from failure. So I always ask about, when they failed, what did they learn? Because there are a lot of successful people who externalize everything negative, saying that वो मेरी तो कुछ गलती नहीं है, लर्निंग नहीं है, बाकी मार्केट खराब था, प्रोडक्ट खराब था, को फाउंडर खराब था, ऑल ऑफ दैट, बट आई लुक फॉर पीपल हु रियली, बिकॉज आप जो भी बिजनेस स्टार्ट करोगे ना, 5 साल में वो पिवट हो जाएगा, कुछ और बन जाएगा, मार्केट बदल जाएगा. At that time, it's not your business model or your pitch that will be matter. You are the one who will matter. Like, are you somebody who can adapt to this new reality and move as per the market, figure out product market fit again? So I am betting on the founder, and a founder who's,
Resilient.
humble enough to learn from failures.
Resilient and
And
humble.
resilient.
So we'll end with a quick rapid fire round. So I request you to answer in one word or one sentence about your leadership style, about Vineeta the person. So
Sure.
are you ready? I'll start.
Ready.
So are you data driven or a gut driven?
Guts driven.
Okay. Scale fast or build slowly?
I have scaled quite fast, but my learning is it's better to build slowly.
Okay. Profitability or market share?
Both.
Okay. Understanding trends or creating trends?
Understanding trends.
Consensus or command?
Generally consensus.
Hard work or resilience?
Resilience.
Okay. Patience or restlessness?
Patience.
Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
Physical books or audio books? You partially answered this.
Physical books by far.
Oh, okay. So podcast, but physical books.
No. So podcast is a good substitute because a lot of people haven't written. But Naval Ravikant says that when you listen to an audiobook, it's like drinking juice instead of eating a fruit. So you get only part of the takeaway. Book पढ़ते time जो मिलता है वो audiobook में नहीं मिलता.
So last three. What's your preferred mode of communication? Phone or email or WhatsApp?
It ends up being a lot of WhatsApp, unfortunately. But my preferred mode is face to face.
Okay. Money or power?
Oh God. I think money. Money gives more freedom. So yeah, money.
And the last one, which one was tougher, building the business or training for ultra marathon?
Building the business. Much tougher.
Oh wow. I thought you'd go the other way.
No.
Thank you, Vineeta. It's been an amazing learning experience hearing about your journey. I think you're one of the few people that have come here and spoken more about failure and resilience than about, the path to success or that being part of the process. And I so strongly that resonates with me. I think far too many times from great leaders, we only hear about what works. But to hear about a real story, to hear about 10 years of patience, to hear about 10 years of failures, to hear about colleagues being successful and I think it just prepares us in a better way to face the real world once you get done with your education. So I thank you, V, for being so vulnerable, so open, and really sharing with all of us your journey and what kept you on the path. I think the lesson I take away is put yourself in the path of failure. Get out of your comfort zone, do things that will make you fail, get used to failure, and that is what is going to give you resilience, patience in the long term, and that is what is going to create great businesses like the one you've created. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. As a token of our appreciation, we're going to share with you a green certificate. So instead of giving bouquets, etc., we plant a tree in the name of one of our guests, and we're going to email this over to you.
That's amazing.
So once again, thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure to chat with you. I think it was a great learning experience for me.
Super. Thank you.
And I'm sure it was for each one of our students and faculty members as well.
Thank you so much, Srivats. And I do look forward that 10 years later, one of your students will meet me at some airport and tell me that, they did not quit because they remembered what we spoke about. And that's what I really want to share all the vulnerabilities for.
Thank you so much. That's what we are trying to do here at Changemakers at Jaipuria. Thank you so much.
Super. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.